Or let's cross to the Delhi suburb of Noida. He's one of India's most prominent public interest lawyers and human rights activists. Prashant Bhushan, thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
It's my pleasure.
What's your reaction to this news by Amnesty International?
Well, I'm not surprised, given the kind of harassment that they were undergoing at the hands of the Indian authorities. You see, they were being raided by income tax, by the enforcement directorate. Their accounts were being scrutinized minutely. They were prevented from taking any foreign funds. And thereafter, their bank accounts were frozen. And their director in India, he was being charged for sedition, for all kinds of other offenses, etc. So I'm not surprised with this scale of harassment that Amnesty decided to close its India office.
Which do you think is the issue that hit the raw nerve for authorities? Is it Jammu and Kashmir? Is it Amnesty's documentation of police brutality back in February during riots in Delhi?
It's all of those. You see, this government is a totally fascist government. They are cracking down on all human rights activists and human rights defenders, whether the people who have been arrested in the so-called Bhima Koregaon case, where some of our finest human rights lawyers and activists have been arrested on an absurd charge of plotting to murder the Prime Minister. Similarly, some of our finest activists, students, etc., have been arrested in connection with the Delhi riots, though these are the people who were constantly exhorting people to do their protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which is clearly unconstitutional and discriminatory. They were telling them to do it totally peacefully. And instead of arresting the people who actually fanned the riots or who instigated people to indulge in violence, the Indian authorities and the Indian police have arrested all these activists, etc. So there is a very widespread crackdown on human rights activists, human rights organizations, and the right to free speech itself, on dissent itself. So this is just part of that whole campaign by this government to snuff out all dissent and human rights activities.
On the issue of the accusation of police complicity in the crackdown in which at least 50 people were killed in those riots, have activists and human rights lawyers been able to shed more light?
Oh, yes. I mean, enormous light has been shed. There are videos showing these policemen beating up people to death. There are videos showing the policemen breaking up CCTV cameras. There is clear evidence which has come out that the police did not even get the CCTV evidence of those places where the riots took place and allowed that CCTV evidence to be destroyed. The police is acting totally at the behest of the political government, which wants to victimize all those who were protesting against this totally discriminatory and unconstitutional law which the central government had brought in, which discriminates against the Muslims, called the Citizenship Amendment Act.
And you personally, Prashant Bhushan, you were convicted last month of over to 1 rupee fine, symbolically, over 2 tweets taking aim at the Supreme Court. Now, is this a separate issue, or is this part of the general malaise in India?
Well, it is part of the general malaise, because the main tweet was in which I said that when historians look back at the last 6 years and see how democracy has been destroyed in India, even without a formal emergency, they will particularly mark the role of the Supreme Court and the last 4 Chief Justices of the Supreme Court in this destruction. Now, this was a comment on the state of democracy, or the state to which democracy has been reduced to in India in the last 6 years by this Modi government, as well as on the fact that the Supreme Court and the last four Chief Justices had singularly failed to check this decline of democracy, when it is the duty of the Supreme Court to protect our democracy, to protect fundamental rights, and to protect our Constitution. So therefore, the contempt was, of course, regarding my comment on the Supreme Court, but it was the same comment in which I was commenting on the decline of democracy in India in the last 6 years.
And the Supreme Court taking exception, the Supreme Court taking exception to someone criticizing them or their authority, is that really something new?
No, well, in a way it is new, because it's really in the last 6 years that we have seen that the Supreme Court has collapsed and is just willing to do whatever the government wants it to do. So therefore, they were taking exception, though formally they were taking exception to my comment on the Supreme Court, but they were also taking exception to my comment on the decline of democracy, because one of the judges, the senior judge on this bench, was known for his very close proximity to the BJP and this government.
Now, one final question for you. Again, the fact that Amnesty International is forced to shut down, does that not just draw more attention to the abuses they were highlighting? Does it help or hinder the Indian government?
Well, it helps the government in as much as Amnesty International will not be able to write reports about what's happening in India, or will find it much more difficult to write reports about that. But it certainly paints a very bad and very ugly picture of the Indian government, especially abroad, in India as well as abroad. So in that sense, it helps and hinders the government.
And you use the word fascist. Isn't that a bit too strong?
Well, I think that's the minimum that needs to be said about this government, which is in a very, very systematic way destroying, throttling the freedom of speech, dissent, all the institutions of democracy, including the judiciary, the election commission, the Human Rights Commission, and various other regulatory bodies. But it is also cracking down on scientific temper, on critical thinking, on all civilized values themselves. They have let loose a lynch mob on the streets, on the social media. They have suborned the mainstream media in India, which is now reduced to just spreading falsehood and hatred, and trying to divert people's mind from real issues to totally irrelevant issues. Like for more than 100 days, they have been covering the death of one Indian film actor and trying to hound one poor woman so that she gets arrested. And now they are trying to hound all the actors in our Indian film industry, etc. It's astounding what is happening in India. Fascism is not a strong word.
Not too strong a word, you say. Prashant Bhushan, the public interest attorney, many thanks for joining us from the Delhi suburb of Noida.
Thank you. Thank you.